Alan and Sean here from the Prancing Pony Podcast, welcoming you to the Tolkien Experience Podcast.
The Tolkien Experience Podcast is an attempt to bring the fan and scholarly communities together around our shared passion, the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Each episode features a notable scholar or member of the fan community sharing their Tolkien experience.
And now we'll send you over to Sara and Luke.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Sara Brown.
And I'm Luke Shelton.
Every other week, we share with you an interview of a Tolkien scholar or fan.
That's right. In these interviews, one of us asks our guest to respond to 6 questions that help us learn about their personal Tolkien experience.
We are so excited to share this podcast with you. So without any more delay, let me introduce our guest. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tolkien Experience Podcast. My name's Dr. Sara Brown, and today I have with me Anke Eissmann. And Anke's name is probably very, very well known to anybody who has anything to do with the Tolkien world because of the wonderful artwork that she does and that has been shown at many different places, different Tolkien conferences, different publications. And I'll be talking to her about that. But just let me tell you a little bit more about Anke first. She's a freelance illustrator and graphic designer living and working in Herborn, Germany. Since studying visual communication at Bauhaus University in Weimar, Germany, and graphic design at Colchester Institute in the UK, she's worked for a number of international publishers, usually on fantasy publications and children's literature. And this includes books on Greek mythology, fairy tales and ghost stories, adaptations of historic tales such as Beowulf, mixes of fantasy and historical subjects such as Naomi Novik's Temeraire series, and most predominantly, as we know, wonderful watercolours that are inspired by the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. And as I hope she's going to tell us a little bit more about when I talk to her, Tolkien's writings have been one of her major sources of inspiration for almost 30 years. Although I refuse to believe that, having met her in person, I can't believe she's more than 25 in total anyway. As an active member of the Tolkien Society and the German Tolkien Society, her Tolkien and fantasy-inspired works have been exhibited at galleries and international conventions, gatherings, conferences. If you've been to Oxenmoot, you've probably met her there, all sorts of places. She's very well known in our world. Apart from Tolkien, her interests and sources of inspiration include subjects like mythology, history, historical reenactment, design, nature, film, and cinematography. And she's also done quite a bit of artwork, as I know, because I've bought some of it, from the BBC series Sherlock. Her preferred media for artistic expression are watercolour, pencil and ink. She's rarely seen without a sketchbook, apart from when she's riding her bicycle. Good, because the combination of the two things sounds kind of dangerous. Or teaching art and art history at secondary school. And she has her own website. You can find her at www.anke.edoras-art.de. Anke, welcome. It's lovely to talk to you.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've been looking forward to talking to you because I absolutely adore your art. And I have, in fact, I'm looking around my study and I can see examples of your artwork on my wall as we speak. And I also bought your beautiful illustrated Beowulf book at Birmingham 2019. And it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to ask you about that in a bit. But I'm going to start with our first question, if that's okay. How were you first introduced to Tolkien's work?
I watched the Bakshi movie back in, I think it was Christmas time, 1991. And since it stops with a cliffhanger, it's just I think half of the entire book. I was curious how things turned out, and I remember going on a school trip to London and the UK shortly afterwards, and one of my classmates bought a comic version of The Hobbit. I think it was the David Wenzel comic. And I liked that I recognized some of the characters, Bilbo obviously and Gollum, whom I liked. And then that same classmate started reading Lord of the Rings, and I started as well. I'm not sure if he ever finished it, because it started out as a bit of a competition. And at one point I was so far ahead that I didn't wait anymore. I had to get through the book. And I remember that one of the very first drawings I made was of the hobbits in the Old Forest, because being a teenage girl, it was a bit typical maybe. I was a big horse and pony fan, and that was one of the scenes with horses in it. So, yeah, that was my very first Tolkien drawing in early 1992.
Wow, ages ago. I'm sure your artwork has developed quite a lot since your first picture of the hobbits and the ponies. So I know you've read all of Tolkien's Middle-earth text, right? But what's your favourite part of Tolkien's work?
Oh, that's difficult. I think
you're allowed to have more than one favourite. That's for sure.
I think it tends to shift a bit. I came to like the first book of the Lord of the Rings more and more, because I really like the hobbits and the way the Shire is described. It feels very homely. It's the landscape I live in the midst of Germany is very much Shire-like, with small villages, bits of woodland. It's quite hilly and rural, and it feels homely. And I also like because it's no secret that Faramir is my favorite character. So everything that's set in Ithilien I like very much, again, for the description of the landscape and the care Tolkien put into describing the flora there, which is very Mediterranean. And I also like bits of the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales. So it depends on my mood. It depends on the season. I've also come to get more and more interested in Tolkien's biography. I mean, John Garth and his wonderful Tolkien and the Great War had a big impact. And being interested in history, I like the links of Tolkien's biography and the times he grew up in, and the way they affected his writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you have a favourite part for reading and a favourite part for art, or are the two just too intrinsically linked?
I think they're linked.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, it depends on, with art, it depends on, as I said, on maybe the seasons, things I see, because many of my illustrations are based on things from nature. So, for example, now in September, of course, it's a good time to read and even illustrate the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, because it's set in that time. And in spring or late winter, maybe it's I get inspired to do scenes set in Ithilien, maybe. So, yeah.
So, I mean, you've talked already about your favourite character, Faramir, and about how you felt really connected to the hobbits early on, and also that you enjoy looking at the landscape as well for your art. Do you have a preference for character or landscape?
I think on the whole character, because they are the ones that drive the story, and also because there are many very, very good illustrations of landscape, like things Alan Lee does or Ted Naismith, and I feel they can do it better than I can. On the other hand, I tend to draw and paint scenes that are not picked up so much by others. Often scenes without big drama. For example, I don't think I've ever really done a watercolor of the Balrog scene. Everybody else has done it. But I think I'm the only one who has done the fox so far, so I'm quite proud of that.
So you were drawn more to that quiet moment rather than the moment of huge drama.
Yeah.
So what's your fondest experience of Tolkien's work? That could be either for reading or for art, or obviously for both.
Well, having been in fandom so long, I think the fandom aspect. I think one of the first meeting I had with members of the German Tolkien Society, they invited me to exhibit art at their annual meeting. And before that, I wasn't even aware. I hadn't been aware of a German Tolkien Society. And when I met with them, they were all about my age, and we met at one of their flats in Cologne. And I saw the bookshelf, and there was Tolkien everywhere, and we were talking about Tolkien all the time. And I felt so at home. And the same was coming to Oxenwood for the first time. That was the very same year, because I think Jan Bohm had talked me into it. And I was very reluctant because I don't know anybody there, but it didn't matter. It was so wonderful, and I just felt among friends and family, and it was great.
Mm-hmm. So your fondest memory of Tolkien then is sharing Tolkien with others.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And because that was one of the things that drove me into creating art, I think, because I felt a need to try to communicate what the books had done with me or for me with others. And that was long before the internet. So sharing my art online, I think that was how the German Tolkien Society became aware of my stuff. Mm-hmm. And but then actually meeting people and talking to them and becoming more active online, and made the whole experience.
Yeah, I agree, because it's one of the joyous things about the Tolkien Society, about even those who aren't members of the Tolkien Society but are part of a wider Tolkien fandom.
Yeah.
Just sharing it all with everybody and just nerding out with people who know what you're talking about is such a wonderful part of this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be a really mean question. Do you have a favourite piece of artwork that you've done based on Tolkien's work?
Oh, that's
it's like picking out your favourite child, isn't it?
There are two, which they form part of the same series. I think they were created around the year 2000, and I did a series of watercolors for the Lay of Lathian. And there is one of Luthien escaping from the treehouse in Hirilon. And I remember fetching beech branches for that to be able to paint the leaves correctly. And it was one of the paintings that was done in maybe a day or two, which is quite quick for me. And there's another in that series of Baron cutting Silmaril from the Iron Crown. And you just see Morgoth's elbow and Baron holding the Silmaril and his face being illuminated from below. And the rest of the picture is dark. And that too was done in a very short time. And it's still, even though it's 20 years old now, I can still look at it and think I couldn't do it any better now, which I think is a good sign.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned at the start of this interview about your beautiful illustrated Beowulf. And it is the most gorgeous book. I have spent many a happy hour poring over it. And I bought it from you actually at your stall at Birmingham 2019, and I am so proud of the fact that you drew me a little dragon in the front when you signed it for me. It's so special for me. But I want to ask you about that. First of all, how did you get involved in doing that project? Because I know you've got Tom Shippey's got a foreword to it. It's a really big deal. How did you get involved with that?
Well, it's good that Tom Shippey wrote the foreword, and I'm very, very touched and pleased by that, because the fact that this book exists is his fault. And it started with me reading The Road to Middle-earth and getting interested in the Old English bits of text and the the links he draws up there of Beowulf and the Hobbit, obviously, and Tolkien's own scholarship. And it was actually a project at university when I was studying graphic design in Colchester. Mm-hmm. I did an exchange semester, then went back for my degree back to Germany, and then went back to the UK for another year of studies there. And there I concentrated on illustration. And for the final project, I wanted to do, obviously, an illustrated book, but the focus had to be for that course on graphic design and typography and layout. So I had to choose something that was fairly short so that I could really make a book out of it. And I looked at several poems, and somehow Beowulf, because it had this link with fantasy and there were monsters and dragons and everything, and I thought that might make a good project because it had this historical aspect and the fantasy aspect and a link to Tolkien without being part of the Lord of the Rings or the better known books. So I did a lot of research, read the poem, looked at translations because I wanted to use the original Old English and a verse translation. And I found one I really liked by John Porter. And because Beowulf is, as a poem, quite long, I just picked up the part with the dragon because that's not as well known as the one with Grendel and his mother, because there are plenty of films about that. But the dragon part is a bit lesser known. But I like the link to Tolkien's work, especially The Hobbit, with a thief stealing a cup and the dragon waking up. I mean, that's very familiar for Hobbit readers. Mm-hmm. So, I picked that part, and then it was quite a long process of designing the layout, choosing typefaces. I was lucky that Colchester is quite close to Sutton Hoo, and there's a good museum there. So I looked at a lot of Anglo-Saxon armor and items, went to the British museums to try to get the historical components right. Same as I tried to do with my Tolkien art. I tried to make it look realistic and the clothing and the armor practical, not just fantasy armor. To give the fantasy a realistic grounding, so to say. Mm-hmm. And I did it as a project. I printed out one copy, which I bound by hand on the uni's computer, and the plotter there. And then for a few years, nothing really happened with the book. Even though I always thought about, well, it would be nice to have it published somewhere, but I didn't know who would do that because it would be a risky undertaking. I wasn't sure about copyright because I had used John Porter's translation. And at some point, I just thought, well, I could try it. And because I had done book covers for Walking Tree publishers, who publish mostly academical work on Tolkien, and I knew some people there, I thought, well, just try it and ask them. And they say, yeah, we can do that, even though it was risky for them financially. And they checked the translation, they checked the original text, spelling and everything. And at one point, I think it was Thomas Honecker said, well, we can ask Tom Shippey, he's an expert on Beowulf, we can ask him to write a foreword. And I was like, yeah, please do that. And he was so nice, and he wrote that foreword, and I was so pleased because in a way the circle had become complete again. And also John Porter, they wrote to him and asked him, can we use your translation? It's been used for this manuscript for the book. Can we use it? What do you want? And he said, yeah, send me 3 copies and we're done.
Wow.
So everybody was very chilled and relaxed and very friendly. And so this book was made.
And it is a gorgeous book. It really is. For people who are listening to this, if you haven't seen it, then I presume, is it still available through your website?
Yes. Yeah.
please do go to Anke's website. And at the risk of sounding like an advert, it's anke.edoras-art.de. And really, it's well worth having a look at this book because it is stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. Because, I mean, just the poem itself is wonderful anyway, but then the way in which your artwork sets it off just makes it's like a coffee table book. It really is a piece of art just in and of itself as a book. Is there another big project like that you would love to be able to do?
Well, HarperCollins know my stuff, so I'm available. Of course, I think that's every Tolkien artist's dream to be officially published, even though I can't complain. I mean, Walking Tree have published many of my art on their book covers, and quite happy with that. To be asked to illustrate one of the books by Tolkien would be really nice.
Yes, I could imagine. So you say that you've been doing Tolkien art for 30 years. I can only imagine that the way in which you've approached it has changed over that time. Can you talk about how your approach to Tolkien's work has undergone changes in those 30 years?
I started out drawing with colored pencils because I was familiar with that. And at some point, I think it was when I was still at school, I tried out watercolor because I quite liked it and got familiar with that. And many of my early Tolkien pictures or Tolkien-inspired artworks were watercolor. And at first, I used a portrait format because I think most illustrations are that way when they are printed in books. And at some point around 1999, 2000, I switched to a landscape format that was very much inspired by films. So like a widescreen film. And the approach I chose, which hasn't really changed a lot, was to try to draw as though I was in Middle-earth with a camera and taking snapshots or filming scenes from a scene unfolding in front of my eyes. So many of my, when I have figures in my paintings, they are often cropped as though it's a close shot or sometimes I try angles that, for example, as though somebody is watching a scene through foliage from up a tree or something. Mm-hmm. So I try to have this very filmic approach to depicting certain scenes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So final question, which is what would you recommend Tolkien's work to others? And kind of an extension out of that question, why would you recommend Tolkien's work to others? What is it about Tolkien's work that you would say to someone, this is why you should read it?
I think it's one of these universes you can really immerse yourself in. And there are very many aspects you can follow and enjoy. I mean, if you're into languages, you find plenty of that there. If you like drama or an action, there's enough of that. There's friendship, there's nature. So I think there's something for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Is there a particular bit of Tolkien that you would definitely push people towards and say, here, just read this?
Well, again, that's difficult. I don't think I can answer that. There is so much and so many different things.
I know, it's a mean question. It's another mean question, really, isn't it?
I guess it depends on who I'd be talking to and who'd I try to recommend that to. Because I know that I've been to many Oxenmoods and Tellarian circles where people read favorite parts from the books or parts that they thought were important or just nice to read. And I often found myself sitting there and listening and thinking, I wouldn't have picked that part, but the way it's read now and the way you explain how you explain what it means to you, I understand why you picked it. So yeah, it's very, very difficult to answer.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think most people would have favourite parts, but it's very personal, isn't it? As to why that favourite part is their favourite, that's for sure. So, I mean, could you sum it up? What does Tolkien mean to you?
Inspiration, community and friendship and creativity in many forms.
Yeah. I mean, the way in which Tolkien's work has so clearly inspired you to produce some wonderful artwork. I mean, to see your creativity coming out of that just shows, how much Tolkien must mean to you, such a creative person. Just a slide sideways, Sherlock, because that's another big focus of your work. I mean, I know this is the Tolkien Experience podcast, but what drew you to Sherlock?
Well, at first curiosity, I just heard about it, and I was very doubtful whether a modern adaptation of Sherlock Holmes would work. And I think what drew me into it was the chemistry of the entire cast, and especially the two protagonists. Also the way it was filmed, because it was very very innovative. The way they depict, for example, text in the pictures, the camera work and the lighting, the entire set design. It's very, very good. The costumes. And also I really like the way London was made a character in that series. I mean, it is, of course, the Victorian London in other Sherlock Holmes adaptations, but here, because it was modern London, and yet it still felt appropriate for Sherlock Holmes. I really, really like that.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered what had pulled you towards that, because I admire your Sherlock artwork as well, and I do have various little bits and pieces that you've done, because I think the way in which you depict those characters is beautiful as well. So actually, now is the last question. Do you have a piece of Tolkien artwork you're working on right now that you can actually tell us a little bit about?
Yes, I've started a little series. At the moment, it's just ink drawings of the horses of Lord of the Rings, and I've done 3 so far, and I'm working on the 4th and 5th. And since October is about to start at Inktober as well, I'll try to finish a few in October. So the next one will be the Hobbits and the ponies, but not in the Old Forest, but the Barrow-Downs. And then hopefully Frodo and Glorfindel and Athfaloth.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, look forward to seeing that. Okay, Anke, thank you ever so much for sharing your time with us and for taking part in the Tolkien Experience podcast. I very much appreciate you giving up your time.
No problem.
We are so thankful that we have such gracious scholars and fans who want to share their Tolkien experience with us and with you.
We have a lot of fun making these podcasts.
So much fun. It's always exciting to talk to fans and scholars about their Tolkien experience.
If you want to know more about the ways to connect with this episode's guest that they mentioned in this interview, we provide show notes at tolkienexperience.com. Also, don't forget to follow the podcast on your favourite social media sites.
That's right. We're on Facebook as Tolkien Experience, and also on Twitter as @TolkienEXP. So don't forget to like, follow, share, and comment, because we love interacting with you just as much as we enjoy talking with our guests. You can also follow our personal Twitter accounts. I am @LukeB.Shelton.
You can also look for me on Twitter, where I am @AaronLPalmadill. You can find the podcast on all major podcast services, including Apple, Stitcher, and YouTube.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We truly hope that, in a way, it contributes to your own Tolkien experience.